Good morning. Welcome into 104.5 The Zone. Hope everybody's having a great Friday so far. Thanks for hanging out with us. 615-737-1045. That's how you jump in at any point. We got Coach Mack at 11:20. We'll talk about some OTAs and observations, what we're seeing from the guys who are out at St. Thomas Sports Park right now. Meanwhile, huge Game 5 last night. Eastern Conference Finals, the Celtics. Win or die was the quote from Joe Mazzulla, their head coach, the other night. And certainly, they came through with flying colors. I am shocked by the way that Boston was able to rebound last night. 110-99 over the Miami Heat. They were down 3-1 in the series. Now it's 3-2. And I think that it's as compelling a basketball game that we've had all year. Game 6 coming up in Miami. I can't wait to see how this plays out because it speaks to like a roster construction conversation that I think we're going to have later around the Titans. You've been paying attention at all to the discussion around the Celtics and trying to decide whether somebody like Jaylen Brown is worth a Supermax deal and how that might hinder future roster construction? Any of this sound familiar to anybody? Just running it through the prism of a different sport, but certainly Jaylen Brown, who was speaking to that last night, is going to make it a difficult conversation. And I almost want to make it less about the basketball last night than what we're going to talk about later on. Because, Lucas, we've got some audio of Patrick Mahomes, right, speaking about the idea of Supermax deals in the NBA or in the NFL, rather.
Well, not Patrick Mahomes speaking on it, but an NFL Network discussion on it, on things Patrick Mahomes has said on the matter.
On the matter of how much money a quarterback actually needs. Because we're getting ready to see this with a couple of different high-profile quarterbacks in the sport. We've just gone through it with Lamar Jackson, where Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert are about to enter contract years. And they're going to have to – have you looked at the Bengals roster lately? Just how long that collection of players has been together? Really, even the defense. Like, they haven't lost too many of the guys that they've been on this run with because a lot of the talent is of the same age group. So now Cincinnati is going to have to decide, okay, how much is it really worth it to you, Joe? And they're really going to put Burrow in a tough position where you know how much better that team is made because of the kind of firepower that they have on offense. They've started to lose a couple of the defensive guys because dudes have gone on to get paid elsewhere or have priced themselves out of Cincinnati with what they're trying to do around Burrow's rookie deal. But the clock on that is ticking. Trevor Lawrence is about to be in a contract year, theoretically. Think about how tight those windows are for teams to try and work in. So when we get to this discussion about the Titans later and what can they add, the best available free agents and all this different stuff and how to do this, if there is one right way to do this, and there doesn't appear to be one right way to keep your team competitive while also still trying to get through the R-word process, the reconstruction, the rebuild, the renovation, whatever. How many? We had a list. I think I've lost it since the offseason started. But I do think it's an interesting kind of parallel to run that through. Jaylen Brown was great last night.
I knew I should have kept the list.
The list of R words?
I told you I wanted to keep track of the list.
Why?
But you wanted it. You wanted the list of R words, and I knew you couldn't be trusted with it.
It does feel like there's a parent-child relationship here that seems like it should be the inverse, and it's actually not. I can't be trusted to keep track of anything. But I do think that's kind of the way that I've been watching this series. And, obviously just watching basketball because that's what's on. And the hockey has been, again, another overtime game last night. Absurd. Completely absurd, these two postseasons.
Stars stayed alive.
For different reasons, right? Because you have the one sweep. You have two sweeps and two respective conference finals in hockey and in basketball. And then this other series has become infinitely more competitive all of a sudden. But again, that roster construction, that perfect ideal that Boston had of Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, and that being enough for them to compete legitimately in the East. When we saw them get to the finals last year, get embarrassed. We saw them get embarrassed for the vast majority of this season against a team that, I mean, it's basically Jimmy Butler and a bunch of undrafted dudes. Do you want to know a disgusting fact? And I only know this because of where he went to college. Do you know who the highest drafted player on the Miami Heat's roster is?
You only know because of where he went to college.
Mm-hmm.
Is it Kevin Love?
It's Cody Zeller.
Indiana, of course. When was he drafted?
I think Cody was a top 4 pick. Because Oladipo, I'm pretty sure, went 2 that year, and then Zeller went 4 to Charlotte.
Oh, and Kevin Love was the number 5 pick in the 2008 draft to the Grizzlies.
Yeah.
He started with the Timberwolves.
Cody Zeller, who appears to be, who looks frightening at this stage with his hair loss. It's concerning since he and I are the same age. He looks like a substitute math teacher out there. Cody Zeller is the player on the Heat's roster with the highest draft pedigree. And they're out there winning it with a bunch of dudes you never heard of. It's crazy to see how that's played out versus what the Celtics are trying to do. And then trying to translate. I know they're not equal things because the NBA can go into the luxury tax, right? The Warriors have been able to keep that roster together because they're just able to eat more of the luxury tax than a lot of teams. Steve Ballmer and what they're doing with the Clippers. He's just dumping more money into it than everybody else. And in the NFL, obviously, we can't operate that way. But I do think that those conversations are kind of similar because that was the whole thing around Bill Barnwell yesterday, right? Bill Barnwell, who's ranking all the NFL teams off seasons 1-32. And he has the Tennessee Titans having the worst offseason of any professional football team this year. Subjective. Fine. It's Barnwell's opinion. He has facts to support it. And we did pick apart some of those things yesterday. But I think that fundamentally, the discussion is the same. Are they capable of being competitive to a degree that satisfies them, but is also in the best interest of that football team moving forward? Because is it good enough just to kind of hover around the middle ground, right? To be above the parity, but not above the parity to such an extent that you can get over the hump that Burrow and Mahomes and Allen and Jackson all are at this stage. I shouldn't say Allen and then Jackson. It makes me think of Acme or AJ's Good Time Bar. I do think that is the thing that's probably frustrating Titans fans the most at this stage, right? Not just the wide receivers. The wide receivers are part of it, but it's not really what it is. It's at its core the idea that they might have bottomed out last year, still weren't picking in the top 10, made a move this year that was the best possible move, the best available move for them, given how the quarterback situation broke down. But it's not quite the kind of reset that a lot of people think NFL teams need at this stage to reach the heights that they want to reach, to get that top quarterback selection, to propel them over whatever it might be that the middle ground of the NFL prevents them from getting to, just to up their percentages. And then you're trying to do all of these things when, of course, there's not a perfect solution because football's weird and random stuff happens all the time with a ball that's just shaped like that. Talked about how random hockey is, how any team in the Stanley Cup playoffs can have a chance once they make the postseason just because of the randomness of the sport. Football's like that too. In fact, that's been why the NBA is been so interesting to watch this postseason because that's not usually applicable in basketball. The better team usually wins the series. And what Miami has been doing think about it. The Atlanta Hawks and the New York Knicks have been the toughest competition that the Miami Heat have had to get to the Eastern Conference Finals. And for the longest, they looked like they were just about to walk all over the Celtics. That doesn't happen in basketball that way. But we're going to get into this roster construction conversation and kind of take a look at where the contracts are, what moves can be made. We've got a list of best available free agents out there. There's some interesting names that I think are worth talking about. And we can do all of that with you. Your phone call's coming up next, 615-737-1045. I'm Buck Rising. It's 1045 The Zone. So OTAs are going on all over the place across the NFL, and I was just kind of keeping track of some other stuff in the league that I haven't necessarily been paying attention to. Other players who are coming back, guys who are performing. Lucas kind of snorted at me when I said, "Did you see this thing about Anthony Richardson and quote-unquote next-level stuff at Colts OTAs?" Didn't necessarily seem to buy into the hype. But Michael Gelkin, who covers the Cowboys, let me find his outlet specifically, the Dallas News. Michael Gallup. So Michael Gallup, wide receiver, looked like he was going to turn into a nice, productive piece for them. Had an ACL tear in 2021, came back from it last year, wasn't really the same. And Michael Gelkin, who's reporting on the Cowboys, or reporting on Cowboys OTAs, talking about a 7-on-7 period to conclude practice. Michael Gallup caught passes on consecutive snaps. He's moving more comfortably. Another year removed from ACL surgery. Nearly had a touchdown, but Stephon Gilmore, who I forgot was a Cowboy until I was reading this report, broke up the pass in the end zone. The defense made a stop. So basically, it's an interesting look at players, not just one season removed or an off season removed or months removed from their ACL surgery and how they're able to respond. What Stefania Bell of ESPN, who is their lead medical analyst, she's ESPN's injury analyst. She's very heavily involved in everything they do with fantasy football, board-certified orthopedic clinical specialist, if you need her qualifications. But she quote tweets that Michael Gelkin report, and she says, "I've said it before, and I'll say it again and again and again. The majority of athletes who have undergone ACL reconstruction don't return to elite performance level until their second season back in their sport. Return to play does not equal return to performance." So Titans obviously have gone through this in the last couple of years. They signed Bud Dupree off an ACL tear. It takes Bud some time to get up to speed, and really, they can't ever get that thing off the ground because even 2 years removed from the ACL situation, ACL was fine last year. He had two separate hip pointer injuries and was it a pectoral situation that shut Bud down finally, if I remember correctly? Then there's Lawan, and Lawan's situation, it sounds like it's different because he did have an ACL repair in 2020. He is currently suing over that ACL repair in 2020 because he's alleging, and his legal team is alleging, that it was a botched ACL repair, which caused a reoccurrence of the injury that we saw last year and may ultimately cost him future earnings because, as far as I know, he's not playing football, and the medicals seem like they're a big part of it. And then there's Harold Landry, who will be almost a calendar year. I mean, more than a calendar year. By the time they actually play a meaningful football game in September from his ACL tear. And in the same way that we're assuming that a healthy Jeff Simmons, who, by the way, is saying that he's not fully healthy yet, and the return of Harold is going to restore this front to the unit that we think is going to be their best advantage or is their best chance at being special in 2023. We're assuming a lot about both of those players, especially when Jeff is up there at the podium saying, yeah, we're still working on it. We're still working through the rehabilitation process, but it's just good to get back out here with the guys, after telling us that he was shooting up his ankle with God knows what for 8 weeks. And that Harold Landry is just going to be able to walk back out on the field and everything is going to be fine. And contract year Harold Landry is going to be the version of that player that the Titans get in 2023. Those are not safe assumptions at all at this point.
It will be almost exactly a calendar year, right, for Landry by the time training camp comes around?
So he tore his ACL in that dead week between training camp and the regular season starting. So it's usually like Labor Day weekend.
Labor Day weekend, yeah.
Right? Because Labor Day weekend is when college football starts, but the NFL waits a week. So yeah, it'll literally be a year and a week by the time they play a football game for Harold Landry. So yeah, that certainly helps of all the different, return to play type of stuff. But it's not just about how the repair goes and if the repair is successful or not, because the repair can be successful and it still be hard for these guys to immediately achieve their same level of performance. Because what the quote from Dak Prescott on Michael Gallup is, quote, starting to come back into who Michael Gallup is and feel himself. That's a guy that I've got a lot of trust in. He's getting his feet under him. He's going to be better, is the bulk of the quote. That's 2 years removed from the injury. He's getting his feet under him. He's got to trust his body again. That's not necessarily an easy thing to do for those of you who have experienced those kinds of injuries before, whether you're a professional athlete, whether you're a former college athlete, whether that happened to you in high school. And this is something that you can identify with. So that, and in the world of like things that I'm trying to check off that I know or I don't know about this football team, I think that I have to put Harold Landry as an unknown in the middle of all this until such time as we see that he is that player. And he's going to get criticism that's going to be unfair when he can't or in a specific moment isn't necessarily able to live up to what that player was before the ACL tear. In this coming season, he's going to face criticism from fans. People are going to talk about how much money he makes. If it's not, if it's not clean this year, then people are going to talk about, okay, well, he needs to take a pay cut or restructure, or he's making too much money at this point. Like all of those things, the cycle, you can see it, right? You can see it coming. And how he responds to that, that's a huge unknown. But I do think that among the things that I've been thinking about this offseason, or maybe that I haven't been thinking about enough this offseason, that this kind of sparked a thought in the back of my head reading some of those reports coming out of Cowboys OTAs and how that might be applicable to Harold at this point. 615-737-1045 is the number. In the F&M Bank chat, T.N. Berg says, I've tore my ACL twice, and your knee will never feel the same. So have you ever had anything like this? You were a soccer player, yeah? Do you ever have any kind of ligament issue like this, ligament tear?
No. Only injury I ever suffered was a sprained ankle. Knock on wood.
Yeah, I think I had a broken toe, but you can't really do anything about those things. So, it was just, deeply unpleasant for a period of time, and that was like high school football.
I mean, Tyjae Spears tore his ACL in the 2020 season.
Yep.
With Tulane. I've got his year-to-year stats from college pulled up. So he was the starting running back in Tulane his sophomore year, 2020, the COVID year, played in 3 games before tearing his ACL. He returned for the 2021 season, and Tyjae's knee injury concerns are very widely publicized since he got drafted. In 2021, he played in all 12 games, rushed 129 times for 863 yards, averaged almost 7 yards per carry, 9 touchdowns, and 145 receiving yards. And then 2022, obviously, the massive jump with over 1,500 rush yards and over 250 receiving yards.
So he's hugely productive, and that's a question as to whether he even has the ACL, right? The reports are that he doesn't, and his response is, I'm healthy. When asked specifically, do you have one?
He has been healthy and available since returning at the beginning of the 2021 season, with the exception of maybe 2 games missed in that span.
Sure. I don't think the question is, can he be healthy? I think that Harold Landry can still have a successful NFL career. That's not what I'm saying at all. The question is, and I don't want to be doomsday about it, but have we seen the best of Harold Landry or any player who goes through something like this? Because as the commenter is alleging, you can be productive, you can be functional, but it's never going to feel the same, or it might not feel the same, depending on who you are, how you recover. Like everybody's body is individualized. Jeff looks no worse for the wear, right? From that February ACL tear. Jeff also freakishly went from a February ACL tear to playing in his first NFL game in mid-October of his rookie season. He's the outlier. And I think that, there is a tendency to hold precedent from one player to the next that doesn't seem fair to me, because you have no idea how each individual's body responds to recovery, rehabilitation process, the surgery, all these different things. I'm just, I'm curious. I'm curious to see how it plays out.
Do you remember what week of the 2020 season Joe Burrow tore his ACL? in his rookie year.
Wasn't it the week after they played the Titans? I think the Titans, they had just lost one game. I think they were 4-1, maybe.
Week 11, Joe Burrow tore his ACL.
Oh.
It was really late in the season against Washington.
Why did I think it was maybe they played the Bengals later in the season than I remember? Because I thought it was fairly soon after they beat the Titans in Cincinnati in ways that they had no business losing that game.
Week 11, 2020, he tore his ACL and his MCL in his left knee, along with damage to his PCL and his meniscus.
That's pretty nasty.
Late in the season, nasty injury, comes back in 2021, obviously beats the Titans in Nashville, leads the Bengals to the Super Bowl. The elongated time and the time allowed for rehab has to matter in this, right? Because we remember what happened with Jack Conklin. That was an ACL tear that happened in January.
And Jack was not right.
He was not right.
That was the whole Dennis Kelly movement, right? That's why Titans fans love Dennis Kelly so much, because Dennis Kelly was the better player at that position.
But that's like a 5-6 month difference.
Right. Chuck in Clarksville is up next. Hey, Chuck.
Hey, Buck. Hey, I've got 3 guys I think the Titans should take a flyer on. The first one, and you're probably going to laugh, I think Jason Pierre-Paul, if you brought him in, on the same kind of deal he had with Baltimore on $1 million a year, and put him on the outside, put Arden Key on the one outside, and then Pierre-Paul and Big Jeff, and then Danico, and then Harold in situational play, that's going to be an awesome line to have to try and block. So that's my first guy. The second one would be Jarvis Landry. I think all he was $3 million to New Orleans last year. I think we could probably get him for a minimum contract, or maybe $2 million if the contract was set up right. And he's kind of a security blanket that maybe Tannehill could use. And then I might take another flyer on Dane Cruikshank just for safety help. It's going to be a very, very minimal deal. He can come in and give us some safety help. So that'd be my 3 I would take a flyer on, and probably be less than $5 million to get all 3 of them.
Thanks for the call, Chuck. Do you have any idea that Jason Pierre-Paul played in 14 games for the Baltimore Ravens last year?
Did he? How old is Jason Pierre-Paul?
He is younger than you might think. How old do you think Jason Pierre-Paul is?
I would guess 33.
He was 33 as of last season. I think he is. He's 34 now. He's 34 and 145 days, according to Pro Football Reference. He had 3 sacks last year. I don't necessarily think, is Jason Pierre-Paul at this stage of his career substantially better than Rashad Weaver, who's vastly more cost-effective, who you have under team control for future seasons? You might need that money elsewhere. Again, they really do not have, $5 million sounds like a small amount, and they do technically have $5 million that they could use on this, but they are very, very cash-strapped.
And Pierre-Paul hasn't been very productive since the Bucs Super Bowl winning season.
His last, the Super Bowl winning season, he played in 16 games, all 16 games. He had two interceptions. We both made the same face. How could Jason Pierre-Paul have 2 interceptions?
He had 2 picks his entire career leading up to that season, and then had 2 in that 1 year.
Yeah, he did it with 3 less fingers. He had 6 passes defensed in 2020. I'm looking for his sack numbers.
9.5.
9.5. 14 quarterback hits. He has not had more than 5 in the last 2 seasons since the Bucs won the Super Bowl. Quarterback hits, that is. Jarvis Landry. Jarvis Landry didn't do anything in New Orleans last year either, and their quarterback situation was not ideal. But for the money, I don't know. It just depends genuinely on how they internally view what they have versus what's out there, and whether it is worth the cost, whether they think it's worth the cost, whether it would be a clear and obvious upgrade based on what they have. Now, it would be easier to make that argument for the wide receiver room than any other, right? More than, and I'm not crazy about their edge depth right now. Who was the third player that he mentioned?
He said
Jason Pierre-Paul, Jarvis Landry, and who?
Cruikshank.
Dane Cruikshank. No, respectfully to Dane. Dane was fine, but Dane had one healthy season, one season of the tight end killer, and you have too many defensive backs than you know what to do with already. If you have safety depth issue, it sounds like Elijah Molden is going to help you solve some of that. So.
Ended the year on IR.
Yeah, I'm good
with the Bears.
No, thank you. I think that the wide receiver discussion is going to be interesting. And again, it's possible that they still do something else. I think it's far more likely than it's just some name at the bottom of the roster. You know, Marcus Johnson, who's the former Vols wide receiver that bounced around, thought he might have a shot in training camp, and then Racey McMath pulled away clearly and obviously. I'm blanking on.
Former Vols receiver that was at Titans camp last season?
Yeah, he was in Titans camp. He was with them basically until the final roster cut. He had been a Jet and a Bengal for a couple of years.
Oh, Josh Malone.
Yes. Josh Malone, like the Josh Malones of the world are what I expect to be the kind of addition that you're making. Marcus Johnson's, right? Those kind of names where Jarvis Landry has been a hugely productive player in his career and is no longer that. So I think it's more the tryout, cost-effective, veteran minimum, whether you think you can get them for vet minimum or not. I don't know what the asking price on Jarvis Landry in 2023 is at this point. I need to look up what he made last year just for a frame of reference with the Saints, but it sounded like it was a pretty cost-effective deal for him to go play in the state that he's from.
Base salary was just over $1 million.
Would you do the Jarvis Landry deal for $1 million?
It was a 1-year, $3 million deal in total that he was on a year ago with the Saints.
And how much of that was that all $3 million guaranteed?
Yes.
Okay. So let's assume it's not going to be 3. Let's make it at its highest $2 million a year. Jarvis Landry appeared in 9 games, started 3. Had as many catches as Nick Westbrook-Akina did last year on fewer targets, so he was a more effective catcher of the football. But 272 total yards, 1 touchdown. Is that worth $2 million a year to you? You might argue maybe, but like if I read that stat line and said it was closer to Nick Westbrook-Akina than what you probably think it's Jarvis Landry should be able to produce at this stage, at 30 years old. He's not old by any stretch of the imagination, but 30 years old is typically where we start to see these wide receivers fall off. I don't know that I could make the argument that he is clearly and obviously better based on what they have for the money. Because I think you can get 25 receptions, 272 yards, and a touchdown out of Chris Moore if he gets enough receiving volume. Frankly, I think you can get 25 receptions, 272 yards, and a touchdown out of damn near any wide receiver in the sport with enough playing time because somebody has to catch those passes. And by nature of being out there, there's going to be some kind of passing volume. Same way that Nick Westbrook-Akina was out there for the Titans, same way that Robert Woods was out there for the Titans. Like somebody just has to be out there to catch whatever passes are thrown. So if you look at it through that prism, maybe that changes how you feel about Jarvis Landry. It's not something that I would be overtly motivated to do. But there's a longer list of available free agents that I think are worth going through, more so for the offensive line depth than what is out there on the wide receiver at this point. Agent S. on the F&M Bank chat says we shouldn't write Jackson from, I think he's saying write off Jackson from Georgia. Kearis Jackson, the undrafted rookie free agent. What should I make of Kearis Jackson, Lucas? You probably have a better evaluation of him than I would be able to give. He's comes from an offense that doesn't overtly utilize the wide receivers. That doesn't mean that they're not talented. Doesn't mean that they can't benefit from opportunity. Doesn't mean that the Titans haven't found a nice piece in the undrafted process that can be Nick Westbrook-Akina or maybe a little more. Although he, again, I'm telling you, for an undrafted dude, that guy is a smashing success, no matter what you think of him.
Nick Westbrook-Akina.
Yes. Heading into year 4 as an undrafted, yes. If Kearis Jackson hopes he can have the career of Nick Westbrook-Akina, which probably sounds counterintuitive to a lot of you. Is there anything there to be made? Should I be paying closer attention to Kearis Jackson when I'm out there next week?
Yeah, don't write off Kearis Jackson, but don't count on Kearis Jackson. It's really hard to look at Georgia receivers coming out. Like George Pickens was never overly productive at Georgia. He battled a lot of injuries, but the same type of issues within the offense of not relying on wide receiver production that we talk about with Kearis Jackson apply to George Pickens. I'm going to pull it up, and you tell me what you think George Pickens' most productive season was at Georgia.
Oh. I've got
George Pickens, first of all, measurables, the talent level higher than Kearis Jackson on all fronts. Was a 5-star prospect, 6'3", 200 pounds.
Yeah.
Tested all those things.
He is what a prototypical NFL wide receiver looks like and should play like.
Yes.
Kearis Jackson, for reference, he's 6 foot 200. His most productive season, he spent 5 at Georgia from his true freshman season through his senior season, and had I guess he redshirted his true freshman season. So his most productive year, his sophomore year, 2020. 36 catches, 514 yards, 3 touchdowns as a college wide receiver. 2021, the first championship run for Georgia. He played in 15 games. He caught 16 passes, 194 yards, 1 touchdown. He had 1 passing attempt for 37 yards. Last year, his senior season, 21 receptions, 320 yards, no touchdowns, 1 passing attempt for -5 yards. So this is not, again, Georgia wide receivers, for exactly the reason that Lucas just laid out, they're difficult to evaluate. I don't know if that's because of opportunity or lack thereof, or because of the player, right? Maybe he was not. I don't want to make any assessments. There's just a lot of unknowns there, specifically about doing the evaluations around Georgia wide receivers, because Pickens was a second-round pick?
Pickens was a second-round pick to Pittsburgh, and he was more productive in his rookie year in the NFL than any point in his college career.
And that's almost impossible to do, especially with the way that wide receivers in the college game are able to produce right now.
As a true freshman at Georgia in 2019, Pickens had 49 catches, 727 yards, and 8 touchdowns. So a great year for a true freshman. And the production dipped since then. Injuries played a massive role in that.
Wait, I'm sorry. Say those true freshman numbers again?
49 catches, 727 yards, and 8 touchdowns for Pickens.
That's not showing up on Sports Reference.
And that was his 2019 season at Georgia.
Okay, I think his true freshman season was 2018.
Okay, so he might have redshirted in 2018.
No, I don't. Those numbers aren't matching up with what
so
I have.
You're saying he didn't register a statistic in 2018?
He played in 1 game, had 1 passing attempt in 2018. Am I looking at the right damn player? Yeah, Kearis Jackson.
No, sorry. I'm looking at George Pickens.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
I'm looking at George Pickens.
Got it. I'm with you. Okay.
So it is hard to gauge.
We'll see. That make you feel any better? We'll see on the wide receiver situation. SEC stat of the day is next. Got the SEC stat of the day. We do it every Friday at about this time. Don't forget Coach Dave McGinnis coming up at 11:20. Who could forget Coach Mack? Talk about some OTA stuff with him in just a little bit. Lucas, what you got for us today?
So, quick look at the SEC baseball tournament, by the way. Vanderbilt suffered its first loss in Hoover last night at the hands of the Florida Gators. 6-4 was the final. So Vanderbilt takes on Alabama coming up tonight. The winner of that game will move on to face Florida. Now, if I'm not mistaken, the loser of the Vanderbilt-Alabama game will be eliminated, and the winner will have to beat Florida twice, I believe, and that will put them into the Final Four of the SEC tournament bracket down in Hoover. Teams still alive. Arkansas, Texas A&M and LSU are playing for the right to face Arkansas on the other side of that SEC tournament bracket. So, with that said, the SEC stat of the day is $300 million per year. So that is the deal, the reported details of the SEC's 10-year deal with ESPN starting in 2024. This is important today because spring meetings are happening next week in Destin. It's a big week looming in the SEC because the hot topic, 8 or 9 games. There's going to be a shift in how the SEC regular season is played as the conference does away with divisions, and we've talked about it a lot on this show. 8 games means 1 permanent opponent, the rest rotating. 9 conference games per year means 3 permanent opponents, with the other 6 rotating. Now, we've talked about this as a no-brainer. Of course it's 9 games. Of course you're going to want the extra conference game, the 3 permanent opponents. It's better for everybody. Maybe not better for everybody. There are certain programs in the SEC that would vote 8 due to competitive reasons. But
would Vandy be one of those?
Sure. Yes. I would imagine Vanderbilt, without knowing, would rather have one more non-conference game that they feel, one more bye game, so to speak, to get them closer to bowl eligibility. Now, 9 feels like the obvious answer. If you polled 100, 200 SEC fans, I think the vast majority would rather see 9 conference games as opposed to 8. But what if ESPN doesn't want to amend the deal or fork over more money for 9 games per year? And now the concerns...
Who actually has control over what happens in these conferences?
So what looked like would be a landslide vote, assuming they do vote on this in Destin next week, which is not a guarantee. They didn't vote on it last year, but it's going to be a heavy topic of conversation next week. By the way, Oklahoma and Texas will be involved next week at SEC spring meetings in Destin. If they do have a vote, Texas and Oklahoma will not have an official vote, but they will be there. They will have a voice on the matter. But there's been a lot of reporting done lately. I was reading The Athletic earlier this morning about maybe 9 games isn't as much of a shoo-in as we previously thought. Because if ESPN is not willing to amend that deal, then what incentive will the SEC have to get to 9 games? And on top of that, some of the strongest voices in the conference, Nick Saban, who has been clamoring for more conference games for about a decade now, has kind of turned on it a little bit. Because the last time we heard Nick Saban talk about this, it was, okay, they're going to give us Auburn, LSU, and Tennessee? Yeah, I don't know how they came up with that. So now there's a thought that Nick Saban and Alabama would vote towards 8. So what looked like a landslide vote now looks much, much more doubtful.
That's fascinating.
So next week could be very, very pivotal in the future of the SEC's regular season when you're talking about 8 games versus 9.
So, I mean, it sounds like the conference, and you'll help me if I'm reading the room incorrectly, but it sounds like the conference was definitely trending towards this 9-game format. And the 3 set recurring opponents that we've talked about. Now you've seen, was it Ross Dellinger? Somebody at Sports Illustrated was projecting what those might look like. And I know there's been several different editions of his projections there on who might be the recurring annual opponents for each SEC institution.
And they were projections, but they were informed projections. And Nick Saban speaking on them gave them some credence.
So things like the Iron Bowl would be preserved under the 8-game format, right?
You would imagine that would be Alabama's fixed opponent, but that would mean no more third Saturday in October annually. Alabama will not be facing LSU annually.
Yeah, because a 9-game format would keep those annually. Man.
So here's
what sounds more valuable to a network, though? Because you would think they would in this. And I'm speaking from the outside, so I don't know how these conversations go down specifically, just the general tenor of them. I would think that in this gold rush rights-grabbing era, where the thing that is going to make you the most successful as a sports network or as a network is going to be your live sports rights, the thing that is DVR-proof, whether you're Apple TV trying to get into the game with a total all-encompassing MLS package, whether you're Amazon Prime, who's now putting Thursday Night Football on streaming, and Peacock, who's jockeying for the first exclusively live-streamed NFL playoff game. My initial feeling would be, well, ESPN would rather just grab up the rights for that extra conference game and inherently make that package more valuable, but how much of a difference in cost is that additional ninth conference game for every team? I don't know quantifiably like what the cost differential there is to be able to give you an accurate assessment on that, right? Because I haven't seen any money projections out there as to how that might impact the deal, because we know the terms of the current deal that they're set to walk into in 2024 when the conference gets realigned.
So Seth Emerson of The Athletic has been reporting on this, and he says there could still be something new to sway the vote in Destin if there is a vote. ESPN could let the SEC know that, for instance, it would be amenable to paying a certain amount more if the league went to a 9-game schedule, because obviously that would be more valuable for ESPN. More marquee conference games. Alabama and Tennessee playing every year, not every 2, 3, 4 years, whatever it would be. Emerson goes on to say, or it could just be pointed out that since ESPN and the SEC share SEC network revenues, more SEC games and more quality games will result in more revenue anyway. Failing that help from ESPN, however, more than a few SEC schools are unwilling to give up the attendance money that they get from extra home games. And yes, bowl eligibility is a factor too for programs like Vanderbilt. So in essence, Emerson says it becomes a divide between the schools already scheduling 10 or more power conference games per year and those that haven't been. He tries to give a best guess at where things stand now. Teams in the 9-game camp and teams in the 8-game camp. Says Texas A&M athletic director Ross Bjork has probably been the most outspoken advocate for a 9-game format. Georgia, Florida, Alabama, LSU have been talking about supporting a 9-game format, but now Nick Saban has been out there. Maybe you're thinking Saban would be leaning more towards 8 if indeed those 3 permanent opponents would be Tennessee, LSU, and Auburn. Missouri, while not an elite football power, Emerson says, has also expressed support for the 9-game format. In the 8-game camp, Kentucky, athletic director Mitch Barnhart has been outspoken in favor of staying at 8. He said last summer it worked for his school, pointing to the annual rivalry game they have with Louisville as their 9th power conference game. Mississippi State and Ole Miss are also believed to prefer having 8 conference games. The Mystery 5, according to Seth Emerson, Tennessee is one of them. Nobody really knows where Tennessee is leaning in this. South Carolina is in that middle ground. Arkansas, people think, are in that middle ground. You can project where these schools would land in this discussion based on kind of where they are in the hierarchy of SEC powers. I would project that Vanderbilt would rather play an 8-game slate. I would think Tennessee would rather play a 9-game slate. I would think Tennessee would want to preserve some of their rivalries that they have.
Well, especially now because it looks like they can actually compete.
Yes, and in an 8-game schedule, Tennessee would probably get Vanderbilt, which would be by far
the worst,
the least marquee of those permanent opponents. I mean, that would be at the
that would be really
bottom tier of permanent rivalry opponents in the SEC would be Tennessee Vanderbilt. There's not much juice behind that rivalry when it comes to football. So this is going to be fascinating. Big week in Destin next week.
Yeah, I wonder what Tennessee would prefer. I would think it would be that 9-game format We can talk about that a little bit more coming up next. 615-737-1045. Also, an interesting discussion around quarterback contracts, specifically second contracts for quarterbacks, and how to best construct a roster around them. We'll get into that coming up next.
It is 11:03. Good morning from the Superbook.com Sports Desk. I'm Lucas Panzica. College baseball, Vanderbilt dropped its first SEC tournament loss in Hoover 6-3 against Florida Thursday night. They'll take on Alabama tonight at 6:30. A loss would eliminate the Vandy boys. In the NBA, the Celtics raced past the Miami Heat 110-97 to stay alive in the Eastern Conference Finals, now down 3-2. They return to Miami for Game 6 tomorrow night at 7:30. The Heat trying to close it out and meet the Denver Nuggets in the NBA Finals. In the NHL, the Dallas Stars stayed alive in the Western Conference Finals. Joe Pavelski's game winner early in overtime led to the 3-2 win over the Golden Knights, who lead the series 3-1. Game 5 is tomorrow at 7 in Vegas. Golden Knights looking to close it out and meet the Florida Panthers in the Stanley Cup Finals. For all your foundation repair and waterproofing needs, visit USSTN.com. Breaking news at once on your home for the Titans and Vols. This is 104.5 The Zone.
Good morning. Welcome into 104.5 The Zone. Happy Friday. Thanks for hanging out with us. We are with you until 1 o'clock today, 615-737-1045. We'll get to your phone calls in just a little bit. Got an interesting roster construction discussion to have. Coach Mack will be here at 11:20, so in just about 15 minutes from now, and we'll talk about Titans OTAs. But there was a clip that Lucas sent to our group text the other day about Patrick Mahomes. He's been talking a lot about his contract and a possible restructure. And the quotes that he's giving are about finding as much balance between the money and competitiveness as humanly possible. So famously, for many, many years, Tom Brady did his contracts in a way that was favorable to the team's salary cap. Now, they would find ways to make it up to Brady on the back end, and obviously he won several Super Bowls. They were able to find value players to win. They were able to do things like add Randy Moss for a season and all these different things to try and find the best collection of players around the best quarterback at the time without breaking the bank on said quarterback. So the Chiefs haven't had this problem, really. The wide receiver move that they made, it didn't hurt them all that much. They just changed the way that they played. And because Mahomes is playing quarterback at as high a level as we have seen him, and I believe, which is a scary thing to say, I believe Patrick Mahomes to be an ascending player. Like, I don't think we've seen the best of Patrick Mahomes just yet, and that's horrifying for every other AFC franchise. So they haven't been hindered in that same way, but he's obviously on a $500 million deal. He would be well within his rights to renegotiate once Burrow and Herbert get paid. Once Lawrence's contract comes up, because that's right around the corner with all this stuff. I want you to hear this discussion, courtesy of James Palmer of the NFL Network, about Patrick Mahomes and that conversation about keeping that competitive roster balance.
That was a big part of this contract. That still is the only one, MJ, we've ever seen like it, right? This $450 million in new money, 10 years. They've always had an idea of why this would work because of, as Mahomes mentioned, the open line of communication between his representatives and the Kansas City Chiefs. That money was always going to be able to be moved around. They did it in March, and they moved some money to where they freed up almost $10 million to make some moves in free agency. And they always had the idea of looking at the quarterback market and then compensating Mahomes accordingly. My understanding is there could be a restructure this offseason. They want to see what happens with Joe Burrow and with Justin Herbert's deals, and then they'll reassess and maybe compensating Mahomes maybe a little bit more. But he always wants to keep pushing the bar forward with other quarterbacks, but he doesn't want to be the highest paid guy. That's not really where this stands. He mentioned that line there, MJ. That's what's important to him. Finding that line to where you make money, of course, a lot of money these quarterbacks make, but also you don't hurt your team in terms of building a roster around you to still still have a Super Bowl contending roster. And he said that's what the greats have been able to do, is find that line. He said these new guys, and Lamar Jackson and Jalen Hurts, they're finding that line themselves right now. Because remember, there's a big contract for the Chiefs that has to get done this offseason. And Chris Jones is expecting a massive contract extension. So Brett Veach, he has a lot of positives right now, but he has some deals on his hands this offseason, and Mahomes' deal makes things a little bit easier in Kansas.
So the structure of Mahomes' deal, remember, it was 10 years, $450 million, an average salary of $45 million a year, and $63 million plus guaranteed at signing. Total guarantees of $141.48 million, and he's an unrestricted free agent under these terms in 2032.
So 7th highest average salary in the NFL for a quarterback.
Already. And that deal was done 2 years ago. That it was an extension, signed a 10-year contract with the Chiefs back in, 2020. So that's aged really, really well. This is why getting sticker shock with a lot of these contracts, it's wasted energy because of how the salary cap and how the television contracts continue to skyrocket. At some point, it's always in the back of my head. It's kind of like the housing market. Maybe not here in Middle Tennessee. That bubble doesn't seem to be bursting. But like the housing market nationally, for those of you paying attention to real estate, it's definitely taken a significant hit as far as the inflation is concerned. So when I look at like the television contract bubble that I think exists in the NFL, at some point, the money is going to be so obscene that these networks aren't going to be able to pay the kind of dollar figures, or at least stay on this same trajectory, right? Like at some point, there has to be a plateau, one would think, because it's not like network television is a great business to be in these days. And while they are incredibly profitable entities right now, I mean, there's a lot of the streamers, a lot of outlets like this overextend themselves with the amount of rights that they're buying up without it being able to make up that revenue on the back end. So I almost imagine that there's some kind of bubble that's going to happen with NFL television contract rights at some point, but it's not in the immediate. And it keeps the money continuing to climb. It keeps the contract numbers continuing to climb just because it's keeping up with the market pace. So with Patrick Mahomes, that deal has aged very, very well in the last 3 years. They've gotten another Super Bowl out of it. They got a Super Bowl on his rookie deal. They got a Super Bowl on his $450 million deal. And they think they might be able to do yet more. But it's completely within Patrick Mahomes' rights to ask for more money, to continue to restructure this thing, to be on the side of the athlete who is saying, no, Pat, if you don't, you have the leverage here, brother. Like, you can do this on behalf of all of us by continuing to raise the bar from an economic standpoint. Because you're still the best, and as these other quarterbacks get paid who don't have the resume of Patrick Mahomes, well, why shouldn't Mahomes be able to come back to the table? He should, and he will. But he's trying to find the best way to do that also keeps his team competitive, because sometimes those two things can't exist in a perfect world.
But he signed, what, a 10-year deal?
10-year deal.
Yeah, how many quarterbacks are going to have that luxury?
Precious few. And
it was how many teams will have that luxury? You're going to get your money. It's just spread out over X amount of time, and we're perfectly comfortable being saddled with you for 10 years.
Well, and they're doing it in a way that also it's a carrot for Mahomes, because they're saying, we're gonna lock you in to this long-term deal, but with the understanding that we have the flexibility within the terms of the current construct to be able to get you more money as the market continues to rise. Because they were also, in 2020, anticipating that this is still yet an ascending player, and that even as there are other young quarterbacks who are as talented, or maybe not as talented. I mean, Josh Allen is arguably as good, if not better, an athlete than Patrick Mahomes, but he's not the quarterback that Patrick Mahomes is, who's still a very high-level athlete. They were also anticipating that they would still have the best commodity at that position 3, 4, 5 years down the line. And in telling Pat, yeah, it's a 10-year deal, but it's not really. Don't think of it so restrictively, because we understand you're probably going to be the best thing out there in a couple of years too. It's interesting for a team like the Titans. We talked about how people were assessing their offseason. We've got some more notes on that Bill Barnwell article from yesterday to get to, but we'll talk to Coach Mack about this, how a coach balances those kind of things, how you balance the egos of guys making that kind of money. I know it's a little different as far as market inflation is concerned from Mack's head coaching days, but certainly those same dynamics still exist. And, of course, Titans OTA stuff coming up next. Love that music on a Friday means Coach Mack is about to grace us with his presence. Man in Black, always made possible by Farm Bureau health plans, like an extra set of pads. They've been protecting Tennesseans for 75 years. Farm Bureau health plans has you covered. What's happening, Mac?
Buck, everything's good. Just went to the last OTA for the week yesterday, and then getting ready for some OTAs next week. We're into that time of the season now, so very interested in watching the you like to keep everything measured at this point, but watching everybody develop daily, it's pretty interesting.
And really, really good attendance. I mean, it's all voluntary, but the idea that there's only 3 players missing at this time of year for this team, where the roster is at its fullest, or as close to as full as humanly possible, like that's a pretty good sign just in terms of what the messaging that the coaching staff and I'm sure the veterans are trying to get across.
Yeah, well, I learned, when this thing was implemented when I was still coaching, that it truly is voluntary, and you learn to work with it. And you work with it, and especially with your veterans. And every case is different, Buck, because every player is at a different stage of development. And, once they're not rookies anymore, and really once they're past their second year, these are businessmen. And they make business decisions all year depending on, what their livelihood is going to be now in the National Football League. So it is voluntary to this point. It starts to ramp up a little bit more when it becomes mandatory, because then – you're giving money back. You're giving money up. Used to be when I was coaching and you would miss camp, you would be fined, but you could rescind the fine as soon as you signed a contract and came back in. The club would rescind the fine, and really it was no harm, no foul, other than the fact that you missed the time. The new CBA, you can't rescind the fine.
Right.
All of the money is gone. And so those are business decisions that players make on an individual basis. And as I said, everybody is at an individual point in their career that is different. And so, with a 5, 6, 7, 8-year guy, it's different than a second or a third-year guy. But they all have the rights under the CBA to make those decisions based on voluntary participation in these things.
Well, and Mike Vrabel talked to us about that this week in the one day that we were able to go out there, Mac. The idea of wanting to create the balance of creating a relationship with the players on your roster, with getting to know these guys, making them a part of your family in essence, but also making sure that you maintain that ability to keep them accountable, and how that kind of conflicts at times as the head coach. How did you kind of establish that for yourself with your teams when you were overseeing things as a head coach?
Constant communication, and was very pointed about having my assistant coaches be very dialed in with their position players specifically, and and keep the communication lines completely wide open. And I always did. And I had guys that weren't there, but I was in constant communication with them. I had my coordinators and my assistant coaches in constant communication with them. As long as you communicate, it's fine. I mean that and everybody adheres, because the rules are the same for everybody. It's just people are in different circumstances at different points in their career. And at the end of the day, as I say, you're not dealing with 17 and 18-year-olds anymore. You're dealing with grown men, especially, 2 and 3 years into their profession. And so they make decisions based on what they think is best for them. But then, they have to come back into the uniformity of the team, clearly, when it's all said and done. But the main thing is the communication lines have to be constantly kept open. As long as those are kept open, there's no problem.
Coach Dave McGinnis of Titans Radio here with us on 104.5 The Zone. I think people, it's good to reiterate that message for fans who might, get concerned with attendance and things like that, even though they understand that it is voluntary, because they don't take into account things like Kevin Byard is totally capable of having a Zoom meeting with Scott Booker, the safeties coach at this point, while not necessarily being at OTA, something that was brought up to us the other day. Like, it's not like they're completely absent from what's going on with the team.
As long as those lines are open, Buck, no, they're never gone. And it's even much better than it used to be now, because you never even used to have Zoom. I mean, I was, either constantly, I was on the phone, or, I would set up, individual times to call, the players or have them call me, just check in, what's up. I would know where they were working out. I could call the guys if they were their trainers that they were working out with. I mean, all of that stuff, though, stems from the fact that you develop a relationship with your players, and then you are respectful of where they are in their profession, knowing that it is their profession. Look, it's their decisions on their jobs. It's their decisions on how they're going to be able to stay in the league, and there's a lot of pressure to be able to do that. And so every guy is on a different plane as far as their situations are. But if you're in constant communication with them, there is no problem. And there's a lot more communication and stuff that goes on that is not known than that is known.
Right.
What is known is who's not there when the media is there. And of course, that's the media's job. This one thing they do is take roll and see. But there's so much more that goes on underneath the surface that, as I say, it's of no concern to me because I've lived it and I know it.
Players have always had trainers that they work out with in their own time during the off season, whether they're going somewhere else, where they live somewhere else other than the city that they play in during the off season, or whatever the case may be. As a head coach, is that something that you feel that you need to be in contact with these guys? The trainers that they're working with, how much do you want to know about the trainers that they're working with prior to, understanding that certain players are going to be working out with these guys during the offseason? How much of that is a part of everything else that you have to keep track of as a head coach? Because that would feel like a kind of hard thing to keep tabs on.
Well, it's really not, because you've only got so many players, right? And you don't have every player that has guys don't have individual trainers when they come into the league. It's when they, start developing. And look, as guys progress through their life in the league, they got families. They got families. They've got children. They've got a lot of other things to take care of. And so, and that's why when the new CBA was put in, Buck, that they made these days voluntary, except for the times that are mandatory when everybody comes back and has to be there, because whether you are there or not for one day or for all the days, you're still accountable for your conditioning once you get in, because sooner or later everybody's got to be there. And so the line is so fine now as far as to how competitive jobs are in the National Football League. You can't afford to fall below that line very far, or you're going to get replaced.
Coach Dave McGinnis here with us on 104.5 The Zone. Check out TennesseeTitans.com for all the great work that the Titans radio crew is producing. The OTP, the Titans Amy and Coach Mack podcast, all available wherever you get your podcasts. What have you liked at OTA so far this week, Mack?
Well, at this time, I try to be very measured. I always am. I learned very early in my career to do that. But what I enjoy is watching the young players progress. And now the new players that they bring in, because now you're flipping 30 or more % of your roster every year, depending on where you are roster-wise and salary cap-wise. I like to watch the new guys and see how they work in. And to me, the first thing I like to do is compare what I've seen on tape or seen in person at a Senior Bowl or seen in person during Combine Week, on the floor down there, with what the guys actually do once they are chosen to a team and start being implemented into what they are going to do with the team that they were chosen by. I like to see that. And then you can, I'm not in the meeting rooms anymore. I'm not doing that, but I can see progressively when you watch each individual group work, you can kind of get a progression of what they're trying to teach. And then in the limited time that when they're in phase 3, they're in the team sessions, you can see what's being implemented, who seems to be picking it up a little bit quicker. But the first thing you can see is just if they've got the raw athletic ability to be able to do what they're going to be asked to do. That's the first thing that I look at.
Well, and, I know there's restrictions on what we're able to talk about at this time of year, but when you're talking about that, the example for me that immediately has come to mind over, again, it's a couple of days that we've had access to seeing these guys out there working, but Tajay Spears in a variety of different capacities. I know the run game is almost impossible to get a judgment on when they're not in pads and when the offensive line isn't playing with a degree of contact at this stage, but both him as a runner and a receiver, Mack, I've just really enjoyed watching him at rookie minicamp and now in the OTA exposure that we've gotten.
Well, the athletic ability is the thing, that I just said that I love to watch it come out and see if it matches up with what you've watched, during their collegiate film. And this is a highly productive player, but the one thing that I can see when I watch him is he can go from stop to start really quick. He's very, very instinctive. He can catch the football. He's a natural catcher of the football, and route running is not foreign to him, in pass routes. But the suddenness, you're either sudden or you're not. And you can see that fairly quickly. Now, you saw it when you studied tape on him as to what he could do, and it's well documented, the production that he had there at Tulane. But when you see him on a practice field, and then you see him in some limited, they're not having any contact yet, which they can't. But you see him in a limited look as far as with the team stuff start. You can see the start-stop ability, and you can also see the vision and the avoidability. If there's a different colored jersey when he's moving with the ball in his hands. I'm really looking forward to watching this guy as he develops during this training camp period, Buck.
All three quarterbacks out there and available going through the drills right now. I know the team benefits hugely from having Ryan Tannehill out there at this time of year as a veteran presence, and certainly the other two do as well as they continue their development in Levis's rookie year and Malik heading into year two. What observations have you made from the quarterback group, Mack?
Well, they're all at three in different stages of their development. I mean, Malik looks, much more settled in than he was when he first got here. He had a long way to go as far as being able to see what goes on, being a quarterback at this level, coming from where he came from at Liberty. Levis is impressive physically, and if you don't know anything about quarterbacks, you can see arm talent. And he has definitely got arm talent. I mean, the ball comes out quick, and it moves, and it's got a tight spin, and it's got location to it. And again, we're in the early stages, and so nobody's putting anybody. I mean, it's like the Catholic Church. You're not anointing anybody at sainthood, when they first start. But the thing that happens is you can kind of see traits that were relatable during their collegiate years, and you see it on a National Football League practice field early on. He's got some traits that are going to be very interesting to watch develop.
He's Coach Dave McGinnis, Titans Radio. The OTP is where you can check out all the great stuff that the Titans Radio crew is producing. The Titans Amy and Coach Mack podcast, TennesseeTitans.com for all of the other stuff that they are putting out there digitally. Mack, I heard that you're and Rhett Bryan's trip and events went well, so I'm glad to hear that, and we're glad to have you back, and it was good to see you out there on the practice field, brother. Appreciate the time.
Buck, always. Have a great weekend. See you.
Coach Mack with us on 104.5 The Zone. So I know the quarterbacks are where everybody's focus is primarily, right? And I told you yesterday how they were kind of breaking that up. And Mike Vrabel told you the night that Levis was drafted how they were going to approach this thing. Tannehill starter, Willis 2, Levis 3. And how that was reflective in it's one OTA practice. They had 3 this week. One was open to the media. How in that one OTA practice you saw Levis not taking reps necessarily, but working behind Ryan Tannehill and observing behind Ryan Tannehill while Malik Willis worked with the 2s. And that's how it's going to be for the foreseeable future. And then I think in training camp you might start to see those dynamics shift. Should they shift before training camp? Then obviously that'll be a point of discussion. The next time that we are out there on the practice field with them will be next Wednesday. Again, that'll be in the middle of the show, so we will get you as much information as humanly possible based on the timing of it.
Would it probably take a preseason game or two for that dynamic to shift?
I would say it would take one, right? Because, and here's what I'll say. It'll depend on when they do the joint training camp practices. Because it sounds like Vrabel was kind of alluding to the idea that they might do one home, one road this year.
Oh, so multiple joint practice.
Right,
practice
because
sessions.
they have two road preseason games, Chicago and Minnesota. They finished their preseason at home against New England, if my memory serves, which would match up with Mike Vrabel and Bill Belichick, they've done the joint training camp things several different seasons now, so that's not something that would be beyond the pale.
Last time was 2019, right?
Yeah, it was it was Brady's last year as a Patriot, and famously all those clips of Brady walking out of the Titans practice facility and walking onto the practice field in ways that Mike Vrabel did not take kindly to, but was giving him a hard time about. No jogging on the practice field. So I think depending on when that first joint work comes, right? Because they value those practices more than they do the actual games. They value the competition there in those practices more than they do the actual games based on the personnel that they'll use in preseason games versus the obvious practices. Now, in the last couple of years, you'll remember this, Vrabel hasn't been using a lot of the vets in the joint practices. Like A.J. Brown and Julio Jones did not participate when the Titans were in Tampa for a week. They have had moments where they've been more restrictive on the guys that they're putting out there. And I think didn't Arizona have a COVID situation last year? Wasn't there something with Arizona where they didn't travel a bunch of players?
Hopkins was here.
Was he was here?
I believe Hopkins was participating, was he not? In joint practices?
I don't think so.
I feel like I remember.
I remember Kyler being here and out there for like a day.
No, Kyler didn't participate in any team drills or anything.
I would have to go back and look at my notes.
I feel like I distinctly remember watching Caleb Farley against DeAndre Hopkins, like going out of my way to pay attention to what Titans corners were doing against.
It's possible because we were doing the show, right? So there's only a couple of minutes before practice that you and I get before we have to come over to the setup with Kirby and then watch what we can see over people.
He might not have done team drills, Hopkins, but I'm pretty sure
he suspended.
Did some individual stuff.
But with that suspension wouldn't be applicable, I guess, to training camp. The suspension would have been applicable to the regular season and then practice. So
Deshaun Watson was playing in preseason games last year.
Oh, that's right. What a ridiculous thing. God. 615-737-1045 is the number. Speaking of things that we want to point and laugh at out of OTAs, the reports coming out of Colts OTAs coming up next. Before we make fun of the reports coming out of Colts OTAs, we'll do so shortly. I have a question. I have a relatability question that I'd like to pose to the room. I feel like we haven't made enough fun of me on this Friday. I feel like that's what people mostly come to the show for. Not information, not sports analysis, not insights, not intelligence. Mostly just a point and laugh. So we'll satisfy that with Anthony Richardson here in just a second. But we are. Do you have Memorial Day plans? Are you working? You have a soccer game, yeah?
Yes, Nashville hosting Columbus Crew Sunday night.
So, and of course you can hear that on 104.5 The Zone, and
we'll be here on The Zone. You can watch it on Apple TV. There's the option to toggle the audio onto the home radio broadcast, and we're back on Sirius XM FC this weekend.
Okay, there it is. You can check out Lucas and Jaleel Anibaba on the call of the Nashville SC game. Meanwhile, many of us will be celebrating the Memorial Day weekend, the long weekend. I know everybody's excited about that. We will not be on. There will be no primetime show Sunday, for what it's worth. With Bert and I, there will be no radio show on Monday. Collectively, they will have other programming available for you.
We will be on Monday.
I'm not on Monday.
You are, but you aren't.
What?
If you get in your car at 10:17 a.m. on Monday and drive around, you will hear yourself.
Why? Because somebody will be trolling me by playing things like That's Fantastic in ways that I have no control over?
A collection of some of our finest work over the course of the last few weeks.
That's not saying very much. I don't think anybody would describe what we do as fine work.
A greatest hits collection, if you will.
Okay.
We'll be playing the hits on Monday.
That's Monday. But I'm going out to a friend's boat on Center Hill Lake this weekend. And I was planning on, I don't have any interest because Center Hill is a decent drive. Like, obviously, moderation is going to be in practice there because I have to come back to Nashville. I'm not staying out at Center Hill overnight. I have to come back to Nashville because my parents are flying back in from Israel after their 6-week global adventures. Their last stop having been in Israel, and they need me to pick them up from the airport at 8:30.
Retirement sounds awesome.
It does sound cool, doesn't it? I mean, you saw those pictures that my mom was sending me, right? They're wild.
Yeah, only like 40 more years.
We'll see. By the time we get, it might be different by the time we get there. And also, we work in a profession that it would be particularly difficult to take the microphones away from us. Most people who have our jobs don't go away. They just keep finding different internet streams to do shows from as they sink into the sea. But
what's your question?
My question is, I offered to drive some people who are also going on the boat with me. It's not my boat, but also going on the boat with me. I offered to drive. And one of my friends says, yeah, that's great. Do you have room for the dog? And I said, no. The dog is not getting in my car. The dog cannot come to the lake with us. I don't want the dog anywhere near my car. I just got my car detailed. Am I a bad person because I won't let the dog in my car? I would rather pay to Uber to Center Hill with the dog than let the dog in my car. Am I a bad person?
I want to roast you so bad for this, but I have been there. What kind of dog?
It's a golden retriever. It's like a 3-year-old golden retriever, which is basically a puppy. Those things are hair and energy everywhere until they're like 10.
Scoop on the F&M Bank chat says, yes, you are a bad person. Just get it detailed again.
No, I mean, I can. I'm probably going to. No. Not like anytime soon.
I'm gonna hold back on this one because I get it. I get it. I've been in this situation where, I have lived with a dog, my roommate's dog, for the last 6 years. And
it's an older dog. It's a very well-behaved dog.
I adore this dog. I love him as if he was my own. His name is Case. He sheds like crazy. Yeah. And as much as I love him, I do avoid bringing him into my car because there is hair everywhere, especially after I've cleaned it. So I'm going to hold back on this one.
Okay. I win one?
Yeah, I'll give you this one.
That never happens.
I'll give you this one.
I think there's a degree of responsibility. Like if somebody else was to drive and the dog owner wanted to drive and the dog owner wants to take the dog in their car, that's fine. Like, I'm not crazy about dogs, but I'll get over it. Like, I don't have a problem with the dog. The dog is well enough behaved. Like, so it sheds a little on me, or there's drool every once in a while. Like, those things are manageable, even as I'm not crazy about it. But if you are asking as a dog owner to bring your dog in somebody else's car, I feel that the car owner should have the right to say no.
Yeah, I'm actually with you. And the F&M Bank chat actually appears to be mostly siding with you. I don't know if this has ever happened before in the history of the show.
Win. I don't know if that's good or bad for the show. It's better when I lose, not when I win.
Alex says, I don't let my own dog in my own truck.
Okay. A victory for the people. Brad in Charlotte is next. Hey, Brad. Hey, Brad.
Hey, guys. Absolutely great show. Love the sports. Love the chatter. I do want to weigh in on the dog thing. I have 2 large dogs. I don't let them in the car. Too much fur. I mean, if they have to go to the vet, we go to the vet. But I have an F-150. I can put a cage in the back with the 2 of them in there, and they'd rather look out at the world anyway.
Yeah.
So, dog in the car. No, love dogs. Have a cat too, but no dog in the car. So you are 100% correct.
Unbelievable.
And I'm sure the dog would have a great time at the lake, but maybe they can drive themselves.
That's what I'm saying. There will be dogs at the lake. The dogs at the lake are not my problem.
Yeah, I don't want the dog to miss out on the lake experience.
No, I'm not. I do not fault the dog for wanting to also participate in fun, sun, water. They have one of those like lily pad things that the dog can actually like run on. You know what I'm saying? So it's not like it is a good experience for the dog. I don't have a problem because I've gone with this group before. Many of them have dogs. That's not me. It's not for me, but that's fine. Like, we can coexist. I just don't want it in my car.
I feel like you threw that out and then ducked and then slowly
I was scared.
Poked your head up above to like, oh, nobody's throwing anything
I was
at me.
scared. Because every time, that's the only time that I've had success in one of these unrelatability stories. Excellent work by us. All right, you want to make fun of Anthony Richardson?
Yeah, what is going on with who is responsible for this hype machine right now?
I mean, Twitter is the answer.
No, is it Twitter or is it Shane Steichen?
Well, okay, so the quotes from Shane Steichen, who, of course, is the former Eagles offensive coordinator, now turned Colts head coach. The headline, and it got aggregated in ways that make it seem probably more, hyperbolic than Shane Steichen intended it to be. So I'm not exactly pinning this on Shane Steichen, first-year head coach. But Anthony Richardson, obviously drafted by the Colts, 4th overall. They are currently, according to reports, splitting time, first-team reps between Gardner Minshew, who was signed this offseason, and Anthony Richardson. Shane Steichen said at his press conference yesterday via Stephen Holder of The Athletic that about the rep splitting and that everything is an evaluation. Anthony Richardson has made some big plays today and has done some next-level stuff in his short time on the field for the team. So, okay, is that Shane Steichen's fault for using the term next-level stuff in OTAs? Because, I mean, for all we know, next-level stuff could be, yeah, he's setting protections, and he wasn't doing that during rookie minicamp. Like, next-level stuff doesn't have to be, oh, this guy is going to be a world beater as soon as he hits the field. Next level stuff could literally be like incremental quarterback operational stuff that Shane Steichen is excited to see, but that we're receiving differently. Whose fault is it? Is it the fault of the headline or is it the fault of Shane Steichen?
I receive it as next level stuff in the way that we've talked about Anthony Richardson with his physical ability, his arm, and he can make eye-popping plays. And I'm sure he's done that at OTAs. And I'm sure somebody has watched some particular throw that he has made and said, man, that is next level.
Mm-hmm.
But the hype is growing. And if he's sharing first-team reps, then there's not even an illusion of a battle of he's going to have to earn it. Like, he's going to start. And we knew that.
Well, I mean, this is something that coaches and, again, Shane Steichen, first-year head coach, so the management of this is going to be curious, right? Because we dragged Urban Meyer for splitting first-team reps, remember, between Gardner Minshew. This is not Gardner Minshew's first rodeo with splitting of first-team reps with a very highly touted rookie prospect, right? He did so with Trevor Lawrence. We all knew that Trevor Lawrence was going to be the starting quarterback for the Jags, and Urban Meyer insisted on wasting everybody's time by splitting Trevor Lawrence's first-team reps in training camp with Gardner Minshew.
They pretended like an actual battle was happening.
They did. Like all Urban Meyer's comments. And listen, Shane Steichen may be trying to maintain that guys, even though his owner is saying, yeah, we're going to start Richardson. That's a thing. It was like the day after the draft. Not even the day after the draft. I'm pretty sure it was Friday that Jim Irsay was asked about Anthony Richardson and said, yeah, we're going to start him. 615-737-1045 is how you join the discussion. Best free agents that are available for the Titans to add. We can get into that coming up next.
It is 12 o'clock. Good afternoon from the Superbook.com Sports Desk. I'm Lucas Panzica. College baseball, the SEC tournament, nearing its end down in Hoover. Vanderbilt dropped its first loss of the tournament last night, 6-3 against Florida. They play Alabama tonight at 6:30. A loss would, of course, eliminate the Vandy boys. Winner will move on to face Florida. The first matchup of the day, though, in Hoover will be LSU and Texas A&M, throwing first pitch at 3 o'clock on the other side of the bracket. In the NBA, the Boston Celtics trying to stay alive tomorrow, returning to Miami for Game 6 at 7:30. Celtics trail 3-2. They've rallied and won 2 in a row, including a blowout win last night in Boston. And in the NHL, the Dallas Stars able to stay alive and avoid the sweep against the Vegas Golden Knights last night in the Western Conference Finals. They'll play Game 5 down 3-1 tomorrow at 7 in Vegas for a spot in the Stanley Cup Finals. For your foundation repair and waterproofing needs, visit USSTN.com. Breaking news at once on your home for the Titans and Vols. This is 104.5 The Zone.
Final hour on this Friday. Morale is high. Thanks for hanging out with us. One more to go before Blaine and Mickey take you through the rest of your afternoon before 3HL. 615-737-1045 is how you join the discussion. So I don't know how many of you have seen this story of Traylon Burks and the way that he ended up getting to training camp. Have you seen this at this point?
No.
So Traylon Burks wanted to make sure that he didn't miss the first day of OTAs. Kaharski had the report on this. It was a really, really well-done article. He apparently jumped in some dude's plane. He was flying from Northwest Arkansas. His flight got canceled. There was no rental cars available. So he called, he had his agent call a private, or try and find pilots, private plane pilots, to fly him from Northwest Arkansas straight to Nashville, since they couldn't find a rental car, couldn't get his flight the way that he wanted to be here for OTAs. Quote, they took off for Nashville in this plane whose prop was smaller than Traylon's wingspan. And he was able to make it on time. There's a great picture with Traylon and the pilot. And, Traylon Burks in attendance for OTAs.
Breaking sports news on 104.5 The Zone.
You couldn't get me in time, bleep yourself.
Per Jonathan Jones of CBS, the Arizona Cardinals have released wide receiver DeAndre Hopkins.
Ooh, spicy.
I've had to do some double, triple, quadruple checking because of the lack of a blue check. Damn you, Elon Musk. But
Thanks,
Adam
Elon.
Schefter is tweeting about it now as well. DeAndre Hopkins is officially a free agent.
Now I'm interested in the Hopkins thing. Because I'll take him for less than $20 million.
Changes things.
It changes everything. The Arizona Cardinals have officially tweeted, we have released DeAndre Hopkins. How much? What's the market value of DeAndre Hopkins right now? What did Odell Beckham Jr. just get? 18? It's up to 18, right?
I believe it was 15 up to 18. We'll double
15
check.
guaranteed up to 18, or is it 13 guaranteed up to 15? I need to double check my numbers on that. Now, I would say, all right, everybody calm down. Take 10 deep breaths or 20 short ones, and let's work our way through this thing. Whatever he's going to cost is going to be out of your price range initially.
15 up to 18, yes, for Odell Beckham.
15 up to 18. So let's assume that Hopkins is also going to be in that range. 15 up to 18. That's more money than you have available right now. You can create cap room if you would like to, but it would also require some financial flexibility that would either come by way of whom? Ryan Tannehill, Derrick Henry, or Kevin Byard. Those moves can look like extensions. They can look like restructures. They can be outright releases if you wanted to take it to an extreme. But understand two things. You don't have the money right now. And if you're going to get in on the Hopkins game, is this not a team that would have to overpay to secure DeAndre Hopkins to make it such a viable option for him, where they don't have the elite quarterback, where they don't throw the football, where Derrick Henry takes up so much airspace in what they want to do that it's going to be a tougher sell? There's no proof of concept of veteran wide receivers succeeding here in a way that DeAndre Hopkins would be looked at as needing to pull this thing forward given what else is around him right now. Here's DeAndre Hopkins on the I Am Athlete podcast with Brandon Marshall talking about teams that he would be willing to play for in 2023.
Out there, if you had a list, you say, these are some dope quarterbacks that I would love to throw me the ball the second part of my career.
Oh, that's a good question. I would have to say one of my favorite quarterbacks that I've been watching since he came in the league is Josh Allen. Josh Allen, he reminds me of an old school or of a new school Andrew Luck. And you know, I love Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts. You know, man, he's Houston kid, your dog, Jalen. Number 3, who I would love to have a ball thrown by, Patrick Mahomes, obviously.
Oof.
Number 4, I'm gonna have to go with. I gotta go with the underdog, man. The people, not a lot of people respect this guy, but you know, as a throwing quarterback, Lamar Jackson, obviously. And number 5. That's a good one. That's a good question. Number 5.
Dak Prescott?
I like Dak Prescott.
Any of these young rookie quarterbacks stand out to you? Do you want to catch a ball from a young player? Are you past that point in your career? Like some guys out there.
Yeah, I'm past that point in my career. But I heard that the quarterback we got from Houston is pretty good. I like him. My grandfather was sending me his highlights on YouTube. But my number 5 quarterback, man, because there's some good quarterbacks out there that's young and good. I'm gonna have to go with my dude in San Diego or the Chargers.
Herbert.
I'm gonna have to
Justin
go with
Herbert.
Man.
Justin Herbert.
How far on that list do you think he'd get before he got to Ryan Tannehill? If the top 5 is a struggle for him and he's saying the San Diego quarterback, which I love that they still say San Diego even in the league.
Says he's past the point of working and bringing along a young quarterback.
Which they have on the roster, but this year, that's not necessarily something that he would have to do. Also, does that feel like, I don't want to make that a shot at Kyler if it wasn't intended as one, but it did feel a bit, I don't really want to have to drag one of these young dudes around again and have to bail him out when he throws an off-target pass. I think it's really improbable. It's not impossible, but it is very improbable that DeAndre Hopkins would end up a Tennessee Titan. Should they pursue him? Should they at least figure out what the asking price is going to be? Should they see how much they might have to overpay, given all the circumstances that we've outlined? Absolutely yes. He's better than anything. You want to talk about the wide receiver conversation that we were having previously, where somebody called in presenting me Jarvis Landry, right? And I went through Jarvis Landry's number last year with the Saints, and I said, for what you might have to pay for Jarvis Landry, can you get 252 yards, 25 catches, and a touchdown out of somebody else? The answer is probably yes, because there's not better available options. Even if you know more about Jarvis Landry, even if Jarvis Landry has had a very successful, 9-year, almost 10-year career in the NFL, Jarvis Landry's got to be coming up on a decade in the league. He's not better at this stage of his career than what you might be able to get for lesser cost. DeAndre Hopkins is unequivocally the best available option now out there, and he is better than anybody else that you currently have. Treylon Burks, Chigakonkwo, Kyle Phillips, all of these guys, even if Hopkins is in a state of decline, now in his 30s, he is consequentially better than anything else the Tennessee Titans have to offer right now.
And last
that
year
move I'm okay with.
Last year it wasn't injuries, right?
PED.
It was the suspension.
And was still miles more productive after a 6-game suspension and in his 30s than was the best wide receiver on the Titans roster last year. Eric in the YouTube chat says Mike Vrabel likes working with old Houston players. I mean, it can't be discounted if they're willing to do Jonathan Joseph just to get Jadeveon Clowney. Should they not be willing to do something else to try and get their hands on DeAndre Hopkins? I got to think it's crossed Mike's mind.
Tim Kelly coached DeAndre Hopkins.
Tim Kelly did coach DeAndre Hopkins. Mike Vrabel coached on the same staff in the early years of DeAndre Hopkins in Houston. They're familiar with him. I'm sure Tim Kelly has some ideas as how he might use him. There is no question that they would benefit from an acquisition like that. Who are they in theory competing with? Who obviously needs a wide receiver right now?
That was my question. How many other markets, sports radio shows on the air right now, how many other markets are having this exact same conversation?
I'm just gonna pull up the ESPN. Well, we can talk about that coming up next. Who else might be in the bidding or in the running for DeAndre Hopkins' services, and how much of a market might he actually have? We can take your phone calls on this coming up next. 615-737-1045 is the number, and we can also talk about how much that might impact how you think Rand Carthon has gone about constructing the Titans this offseason. I'm Buck Rising. It's 1045 The Zone. Titans fans screaming at their radio, screaming at their Twitter device as they see the news of DeAndre Hopkins released by the Arizona Cardinals. Help! Help! Somebody, God, get this team a wide receiver that they can trust. Will it be DeAndre Hopkins? I've got the teams with the top 5 at this point. Most cap space, top 5 teams with the most cap space right now. None of them contenders. So that is kind of the balance here. DeAndre Hopkins, we can all assume, is at the ring-chasing portion of his career. Yes? He is somebody who has not won a championship.
Hasn't really come close.
Those Houston teams a couple of times.
The closest would have been when the Houston Texans had, was it a 24-0 lead over the Chiefs in the divisional round?
Yeah, that was the day before the Titans. Or I'm sorry, excuse me, that was the weekend before the Titans were going to play the Chiefs in the AFC Championship.
19
game.
Season.
That's right. And they Kansas City ran out of fireworks at Arrowhead because they came back and scored so many touchdowns so quickly that they were literally ill-equipped to celebrate all of the touchdowns that Houston got scored on their necks. It was almost the same thing for the Titans, right? They had that 10-0 lead, and then Mahomes came back, scored a touchdown to take the lead before the second half, and it all felt like it was going downhill very, very quickly. So here are the top 5 teams with the most available cap space right now. Can you guess before I read you the list?
Okay, I'm going to say Bears.
1.
Falcons.
No.
Falcons are not 1.
Falcons are not 1. Chicago is 1.
Washington.
No.
Tampa.
No.
All right, just give them to me.
Chicago at $32.3 million, and this is according to SpotTrack. Carolina, 27.9. Indianapolis, 23.8.
Young quarterback. Said he's past that stage in his career.
He did say that, but that would be tempting.
He said those words.
I know. If you had a quarterback with accuracy issues, you know how to fix it. Get a wide receiver that's got the catch radius of a 2-car garage.
Doesn't matter if he can't get it there.
He can get it there. It's how much further it's going.
Yeah.
No, that's a Joe Milton problem. The Detroit Lions, 4, 23.7. Green Bay Packers, 16.2. So those are the teams with the most cap space at this point. Or excuse me, I'm sorry. Number 5 is, I read that wrong. It's not the Green Bay Packers. It's the New York Jets.
Ooh.
18.2 for New York.
They've got to be having that conversation.
Hell yes. Where are they going to play all these wide receivers? That might get you Corey Davis. Can you imagine?
You'll benefit from DeAndre Hopkins.
You want Corey Davis?
Not the way you think.
Careful what you wish for. Oh, my God. That would be hilarious. I mean, they could find listen, theoretically, almost any of these teams could find a way to make the money work. They could find a way to free up cap space. They could find a way to restructure contracts, just as we're talking about what the Tennessee Titans are capable of doing with some of these financial gymnastics that would have to be done to get in on the market for this guy. All of these teams. Philadelphia could do it. They've got more time. The damn Eagles. I almost said a bad word. The damn Eagles have more cap space than do the Titans.
And they've got receivers.
Yeah. They do not lack for options. Tennessee right now, and again, SpotTrack.com, $11.1 million. Keep in mind that we are talking about the draft class is starting to be signed. Tajay Spears, the latest to agree to terms on a contract, but they still need money for their top picks at this point. They still need money for an injury reserve. They still need money for the practice squad that they will fill out. So your $11 million is really not $11 million. It's probably closer to 3 or 4 by the time all those situations get resolved. Jacksonville, New England, San Francisco, L.A., Baltimore, Philadelphia all have more cap space than Tennessee does right now.
You said Buffalo?
Buffalo.
Like, let's cross-reference. How many of the teams that have more cap space with the Titans right now have quarterbacks that DeAndre Hopkins listed when he talked about quarterbacks he would love to play with?
Baltimore does. The Chargers do. Did he mention Dak Prescott? Somebody else brought up
someone
Dak
else brought.
Prescott.
He did not say anything about Dak. He mentioned, obviously, Pat Mahomes and Josh Allen. So is Buffalo in there?
Because Brandon Connor in the F&M Bank chat, as does Jonathan Hernandez, says cut 17 and have 8 start. Bring in D-Hop. He's just said he doesn't want anything to do that. In fact, because not everybody listens to the radio show all at the same time, that's fine. Can we play again the I Am Athlete clip of DeAndre Hopkins listing the quarterbacks and expressing his disinterest in playing with a young guy?
Ooh, that's a good question. I would have to say one of my favorite quarterbacks that I've been watching since he came in the league is Josh Allen. Josh Allen, he reminds me of an old school or of a new school Andrew Luck. And you know, I love Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts. You know, man, he's Houston kid, your dog, Jalen. Number 3, who I would love to have a ball thrown by. Patrick Mahomes, obviously.
Oof.
Number 4, I'm gonna have to go with. I gotta go with the underdog, man. The people, not a lot of people respect this guy, but you know, as a throwing quarterback, Lamar Jackson, obviously, and number 5. Number 5, that's a good one. That's a good question. Number 5.
Dak Prescott?
I like Dak Prescott.
Any of these young rookie quarterbacks stand out to you? Do you want to catch a ball from a young player? Are you past that point in your career? Like some guys out there.
Yeah, I'm past that point in my career. But I heard that the quarterback we got from Houston is pretty good. I like him. My grandfather was sending me his highlights on YouTube. But my number 5 quarterback, man, because there's some good quarterbacks out there that's young and good. I'm gonna have to go with my dude in San Diego or the Chargers.
Herbert.
So that's the list, and obviously what he's asked is, do you want to play with some of these young quarterbacks? And what DeAndre Hopkins says, no, I'm not really at that point in my career anymore when I want to be responsible for bringing along a young quarterback.
But I bet you they're playing that audio in Houston and saying, but he did say his grandpa sent him some C.J. Stroud highlights.
Did we ever figure out if Clayton Tune is on the I thought he was talking about the Houston quarterback that Arizona drafted. Did Arizona draft Clayton Tune? That's what I took that
Clayton
to mean.
Tune is a Cardinal. Let's hear that a little bit again.
Okay.
Are you past that point in your career? Like some guys out there.
Yeah, I'm past that point in my career. But I heard that the quarterback we got from Houston is pretty good. I like him. My grandfather was sending me
the quarterback we got from Houston.
Okay.
So he's talking
You're
about
right.
Clayton Tune.
You're right. Okay, so rule that out.
Interesting. Because now we have resident capologists in the YouTube chat saying LD in the F&M chat says the cap is fake, the money is real. The people who keep saying that the cap is fake have just not paid any attention at all to the Tennessee Titans offseason. You are one of the most cap-strapped teams in football. The cap is, in fact, real. If you think that the cap is not real, you are also somebody who doesn't think your credit score is real. I would advise you to go look at Credit Karma one time and make sure that your finances are okay. What are you talking about? The cap is not real. Look at your circumstances. The cap is not real. How can anybody, just because it doesn't hit you all in that season, go ask the Rams about the salary cap, the Titans about the salary cap. Atlanta has just dug themselves out of cap hell. The salary cap isn't real. And then he goes on to say, it's just logic. It's not that difficult to understand it. Please, YouTube commenter with your profile picture that's a cat and not your full name in there. Please explain to me the economics of the salary cap in, what is it, how many characters you're allowed. It doesn't matter. You can't do it. Corey in Hendersonville is next. Hey, Corey.
Hey, guys. You're talking about teams that have a decent amount of cap space. I think Chicago kind of makes the most sense. And if you think about Hopkins being paired with DJ Moore, that's a really lethal combination. But, outside of that.
What does Chicago have, though? They have the young quarterback, Corey. He's just said he doesn't want anything to do with that.
You look at Justin Fields, though. He's not that young. He's been in the league for a few years now.
Yeah, but Justin Fields, I think, still He's
Lot to
heading into
prove.
year 3.
Lot to prove.
And we still don't know if he's any good. That's the whole thing with those court. Like, if I'm DeAndre Hopkins, if you said Justin Fields, and I'm not DeAndre Hopkins, so I'm not going to speak for him. But if you said within that prism, how about Justin Fields, bud? If I'm DeAndre Hopkins, I make a face like I smell something bad. No, thank you. That's okay. You're not ring chasing in Chicago. Now, inevitably, because I'm super dismissive of the Bears, even though I like the Bears offseason. Inevitably, there's going to be a team like Cincinnati in 2021 or the Titans in 2019 that ends up in the postseason, makes a run that none of us expect them to have. Who was that team this year? Did we have a team that kind of came? I mean, I guess it's Jacksonville.
I think what San Francisco was able to accomplish with Trey Lance going down.
We always thought San Francisco was going to be there based off roster construction and I mean, none of us saw the Brock Purdy thing coming.
That's what I'm saying. If you polled 100 people before the season and said Jimmy G's going down, Trey Lance is going down, what happens with San Francisco?
But San Francisco,
nobody's saying NFC Championship game.
Sure, but San Francisco was in the postseason before, and we were all talking about the year prior, and we were all talking about San Francisco.
Yeah,
provided the health, was going to be back in the postseason. What I'm talking about is the team that gets hit with the cliche. Oh, they're really a year away, but here they are.
Giants. I mean, they were the newcomer in the NFC postseason.
I'd take the Giants. I would also accept the Jags because they won a playoff game. I would accept either of those as submissions. And the league brags about how often the playoff teams turn over. So you're never really out of it for that long unless, you're the Browns. And even they have a playoff win here recently. The Hopkins thing, like I said, any number of teams could make this work because the Kansas City Chiefs are currently in the worst cap situation, which is why Patrick Mahomes' contract discussion was a talking point earlier in the show. Buffalo is 31st. Tampa Bay has the 30th worst cap situation in football right now without Tom Brady.
So Buffalo and Tampa we could probably set aside in this conversation anyway. Buffalo pretty cap strapped, right?
Yeah.
And they have a need at wide receiver.
Yes.
Buffalo could stand to add to the wide receiver room.
And Von Miller is tweeting eye emojis. How many of us forgot that Von Miller was a Bill?
Right.
Me.
Beyond Stephon Diggs, I mean, it's Gabe Davis, it's Khalil Shakir, and Trent Sherfield.
Yeah. Tom Pelissero just tweeted, it's not a post-June 1 release, so the Cardinals clear $7.38 million in cap space. Do you know how much they ate? Don't look at the tweet.
They cleared how much?
$7.38 mil.
Would they eat like 11?
22.6.
Oh.
22.6.
He really didn't want to be there.
He lied to all of us. Who said I wanted to go anywhere else?
You.
You literally listed 5 teams.
That's
Arizona
crazy.
held out as long as it could, but couldn't trade Hopkins' contract. Now he hits the open market.
Nobody would trade for him.
Yeah, because they knew Arizona had to release him. It's like, to a much, much, much lesser extent, the idea of trade. People wanted Malik Willis traded, right? After they drafted Levis. And the argument for trading Malik Willis is what? If teams know that you're going to release the third quarterback, then they're not going to give you something else just to give him be able to get their hands on him a little earlier or to prevent him from clearing waivers.
Yeah, Jeff Howe of The Athletic tweets, the Cardinals attempted to trade DeAndre Hopkins, but the contract, injury history, recent suspension, and age all factored into teams being reluctant to complete a deal. Now, as a free agent, the contract won't be nearly as much of an obstacle.
22.6, though, is how bad. They found 22.6 million reasons to not keep DeAndre Hopkins on that roster.
Mike Giardi, NFL or formerly of NFL Network.
Oh, I'm sure that hurt him.
Tweets. He ghosted me last time I texted him.
I'm going to send him that clip.
He tweets, Buffalo has had interest. The Patriots have had interest. Best I can tell, no one believes he is what he once was, and that will be part of the challenge in acquiring the player. This is the interesting part. A couple of teams I spoke with before the draft believe money will be the driver in this, more so than a ring.
Really?
That's what Giardi from his conversations.
Now, and I love that Mike put that out there because what did we do? We assumed, all right, he's ring chasing. He's ring chasing. And that ignores the thing, and it's hypocritical of me because my whole position is these players don't care nearly as much about winning as you guys do. Like, I know that the hype videos get you juiced up and that, playing for the pride of your franchise and all these different things, it's different at college than it is at the professionals. Most people care about getting paid, first and foremost, just as the vast majority of us in our respective lines of work. What do we care about more than anything? Probably our financial situation. So while the championship element of it is nice and the ring-chasing narrative is easy to kind of put together, doesn't sound like that's entirely his motivation. And that's fine. Most of them are like that.
Top of your head, give me the most likely landing spot in your mind right now.
I want to say Buffalo, but I just can't imagine him wanting to play there.
I'm saying Jets.
The Jets have the quarterback. The Jets have the money.
And the Jets have a quarterback with sway.
The Jets have New York.
If Aaron Rodgers decides, I want DeAndre Hopkins, he can find a way to get DeAndre Hopkins. Do you know how much they'll save if they cut Corey Davis?
I can find it really quick.
$10.5 million.
Oh.
Best case scenario for Titans fans, obviously, would be that the Titans find a way to bring DeAndre Hopkins to Nashville.
Yes.
Second best case scenario
is that the Jets sign DeAndre Hopkins and you get Corey Davis.
Somebody gets bumped out of the picture and the Titans scoop him up. The collateral. The collateral from a DeAndre Hopkins signing.
You're like a dog begging and begging at the end of the table.
But it is second best case. If you're a dog, you would love to hop up in the chair and eat the steak right off the plate. That's best case scenario.
I don't care that it's just gristle. I'll eat it.
But you'll take the half-eaten gristle steak that's thrown onto the floor. No, that's it's a terrible analogy. That's just not nice to Corey Davis.
Yeah, but it's kind of what he is in this particular metaphor.
How not to on the F&M Bang chat says, yeah, we'll take the scraps.
Listen, scraps are better. That's the thing. Scraps are better than what you have. Or at least what we think they have at this point. I don't know. I'm not down on Treylon Burks. I'm not really down on Kyle Phillips. I just don't know I don't know what they are. And the uncertainty to me is as damning as anything else. Like, I have no idea what these players are truly, what their potential is. I don't even care about, if there was one word I think I could get rid of from sports discussion, it's potential. Potential doesn't mean anything to me. I'm so tired of players with potential, and that's all. I'm so tired of the idea of Treylon Burks, the idea of Caleb Farley, the idea of Dylan Radins. I want to see actual players put it together.
Why did Anthony Richardson get drafted?
Potential.
Yeah,
I know. I'm not saying it's not a play. I'm not saying teams don't do it. I'm just saying I hate it. Justin in Germantown says, I'd take him if we could get him at $5 million per year. Been a while since he's been a wide receiver 1. He's a wide receiver 3 a bit.
Talking about Davis, right?
Yeah. Corey. I assume Justin in Germantown's talking about Corey Davis there, not DeAndre Hopkins. I mean, sure. Corey Davis, he's not been productive in New York. And again, the soft tissue, if you're somebody who wants available wide receivers, Corey Davis has not historically been terribly available, or at least available at the rate that you would want. Now, Hopkins, that is a concern immediately. Hopkins is just a bigger swing. Man, can you imagine after going through the Julio Jones thing that we're having this basically same conversation again?
I think it'll be made a little bit easier on people that he was healthy and available after coming back from the suspension, largely without fail. For Hopkins was. Julio, we did not see a sample size of Julio overcoming the hamstring before he came to Tennessee. Like, his last 2 years before coming here were marred by the hamstring. And that obviously just continued here. But Hopkins had the hamstring issues 2 years ago, then the suspension, then he was healthy, available, and productive.
Yeah, even if Corey Davis is the cast-off, I don't see them going after Corey Davis. I really don't think there's any kind of interest there, even as the wide receiver group looks the way that it does. We're assuming, because that is a fit that would make sense, familiarity, coaches tend to gravitate towards players they know. I just don't think there's any overt interest in bringing that guy back here. There wasn't any overt interest in offering him a contract that season. And that was a pandemic-restricted season, and there's all different reasons. But, like, people here didn't seem all that upset by the idea of Corey Davis. And I'm not just talking about fans. I'm talking about organizationally. It's not like Corey was a bad guy or anything. It just was like, okay.
Well, Julio was the talk of the summer after they let go of Corey.
Yes, Julio was the talk of the summer. That is true. And listen, Titans fans would take Corey Davis on their roster last year. They would take Corey Davis on their roster this year. I'm just saying, I don't get the sense organizationally that is a player that they would be going out of their way to bring back to Nashville. Even though he lives here, he has a home here, he built a beautiful home here, as a matter of fact, and this is where he stays during the offseason. Like, I don't see Mike Vrabel being that interested. And I think that's ultimately what it comes down to here, because I think in that situation, there would be different. And I'm speculating, right? I don't know how these conversations would play out. We don't know how the conversations would play out behind closed doors. But I'm assuming that Rand Carthon would ask Mike Vrabel's opinion of Corey Davis, and I'm assuming that Mike Vrabel would be like, eh. Now, those are too bold assumptions of me to make. But I think there's enough of a precedent there.
Amar on the F&M Bank chat says Hopkins and Burks would be a nasty combo that would give us a true outside threat in the passing game.
Sure. I'm not disagreeing with any of that. I'm saying you are fighting uphill to make any of this happen. Financially, fit-wise, the best thing that you've got going for you is that you need a wide receiver, and your head coach and offensive coordinator have worked with this guy before. Beyond that, you're going to have a tough time selling me on the idea of DeAndre Hopkins as future Tennessee Titans wide receiver. Not impossible, just improbable. Last call for phone calls, 615-737-1045. If you want to jump in, you can do that. The last time this week for us to take your phone calls. Update the polls and then get you over to Blaine and Mickey coming up next. So there's obviously going to be a lot of conversation about this DeAndre Hopkins release. You can easily eliminate the Titans in your own head if you want to. Ring chasing is a great way to do that. If you want to say that the Tennessee Titans, that's not the best option for ring chasing for DeAndre Hopkins, you know what? You'd be damn right. We don't know how competitive they're going to be. They could be one of these improbable teams that we were just talking about. They could make some kind of resurgence like the Giants or dig themselves out of what they experienced last season and be like the Giants or the Jaguars, come out of nowhere, be ahead of schedule, if you want to call it that. And they could be a far better football team than we're giving them credit for. They could also be terrible. We have no idea. But if you want to eliminate the Titans based on ring chasing, yeah, you can do that. This dude can totally be had for a big enough bag. You can get this guy for money. Money over rings. Rings would be nice. I'm sure he would like to be DeAndre Hopkins Super Bowl champion. I don't think it's the thing that's most important to him, and the reporting, it sounds like, is bearing that out as well. The question becomes, how badly do you want this guy? How much is it worth to you? Are you willing to overextend yourself? Are you willing to complicate your finances in a way that you've just uncomplicated them, spent the last 3 months uncomplicating them in a way that is very, very comfortable for next year? We're talking about potentially $140 million in cap space for the Titans. With all these different contracts that they figure to have cleared up. Now, him and Derrick Henry, I know that they are friendly. I don't know how close they are. I know that they have worked out together in different circumstances. I know they have been around each other in different circumstances. I know that they are friendly enough in social settings. But beyond that, like how close their relationship is, I couldn't tell you.
Wonder that. Was it a picture of them with Lamar?
That's from like 2018.
Yeah, circulating a while back.
Lamar, DeAndre Hopkins, and Derrick Henry all in one picture. It's like if Pro Football Focus actually put out one of those who's stopping this offense graphics with DeAndre Hopkins, Derrick Henry, and Lamar. Now, Hopkins again listed: Bills, Ravens, Chargers. Who was the other team that he mentioned?
You mean just the quarterbacks he listed?
Bills, Eagles, Ravens, and Chargers are all teams who have quarterbacks that DeAndre Hopkins mentioned that Mahomes, that he would be willing to play with, obviously. The last season of DeAndre Hopkins under Tim Kelly, you want to take a guess at receptions, yardage, and touchdowns?
What was the season?
19? That would be 19. So they were in the divisional round against the Chiefs that year.
Yeah, and then they traded him for David Johnson.
What? They should fire Bill O'Brien again. This is so bad. All those different contracts, all the Laramie Tunsil deal, the DeAndre Hopkins and Clowney trades, all of it.
Yeah, Grumps. David Johnson, who is a free agent.
I'm shocked he's still out there.
Yeah, he was a Saint last year.
Okay.
Free agent. I didn't know he was born in Memphis. Anyway, I'm going to say 1,000-yard season. Give me 1,200 yards, 7 touchdowns. Thereabouts.
104 receptions, 1,165 yards. Nailed the touchdown. 7.
7?
7 touchdowns. 7? Isn't that a YouTube video? 7?
For my time.
Oh, don't do that to me.
I don't know what you're talking about.
You're 2 years younger than me. It's like that. Like I'm not going to do the snake voice. You know what I'm talking about? I'm a slippery little snake.
Snake.
I'm not doing it. You can't make me do that into a live microphone. Same generation, jerk. DeAndre Hopkins last year. You want to take a guess at receptions, yards, and touchdowns?
Missed 6 games?
Missed 6 games. Appeared in 9 total games.
743 yards, 4 touchdowns.
717 yards, 3 touchdowns.
Oh.
Look at you. You're getting better at this game, which I think is worse for radio. It's funnier when you go to one extreme or the other. Work on that, would you?
And now, the polls have to be updated. We've reached a crucial point in the show. It's time to update the polls. Take my hand, get to the chopper. Lucas Panzica will give us the final update. Why am I yelling? It's giving me a headache. But it's only a headache. It's not a tumor. Hasta la vista, baby. I'll be back. Why am I yelling?
Presented by Two Rivers Ford, who sells below MSRP on any non-specialty new Ford. What are your expectations for Harold Landry in 2023? Puka, Brian say health. Stay healthy. Jeff says 7 sacks and play 17 games. Brett posts a GIF of Lawrence Taylor.
Okay,
seems
good.
Unfair.
I'm glad he's just slightly. Only the greatest defensive player, arguably, in the history of the sport.
Who comes out of the Eastern Conference Finals? Heat or Celtics? 68% believe the Heat get it done.
I mean, the series is now 3-2. That's completely insane to me that they were able to win last night and dominate, frankly, last night. I know the score got close towards the end, but it was Boston at home the entire time, basically.
I stand by what I want, the Celtics to come all the way back and then lose in heart-wrenching fashion in Game 7.
Your hatred for Boston knows no bounds.
Better recruiting tool, Buc-ee's or chicken on a stick? We didn't really get to this, but 72% say Buc-ee's.
I've never been to a Buc-ee's, and I would say neither. I don't want poultry on a stick. I don't want the Walmart of gas stations. I don't want either of them.
So the context is Auburn put out a graphic saying it's the only SEC school with a Buc-ee's in town?
Yes.
Which
is a recruiting thing that they are trying to do.
Which is like, I don't know. There's a Buc-ee's right outside of Knoxville. I guess it's not technically in Knoxville, but there are Buc-ee's near. Anyway, Lane Kiffin got the Ole Miss graphics department to basically troll that graphic and put together a graphic saying Ole Miss, the only school with a chevron that sells chicken on a stick.
Yeah, I don't want chicken on a stick. I don't want Buc-ee's. You can keep them both.
I want both. Is it possible to do next level stuff at voluntary OTAs? 72% say no.
It is, but not in terms of the way that I think it's being propagated, right? Next level stuff can be huddle operation, working efficiently within a play clock. That I think, I did that. I did that so confidently that I wasn't even scared of it this time.
Scared of what?
Play clock.
Yeah, there were some issues with that this week. We're there.
Tom Hart, I'm very, very sorry for what happened to you. It's happened to me before, too. Not like that, but it's happened.
Who would the Titans be competing most with to sign DeAndre Hopkins? Jorge says the Chiefs. Kyle says the Packers.
I mean, Jets is probably the best argument, or at least the Jets seem like they make the most sense. How hard or how much they try to pursue him, we don't know. But it would be a really, really good idea.
Yeah, Goody says the Bills, the Patriots, the Jets probably, just listing AFC East teams.
Yeah, what would the Patriots, I mean, he doesn't want to go play for the Patriots right now.
Bill O'Brien, a reunion? Is that what he wants?
No.
Who would he rather reunite with, Bill O'Brien or Tim Kelly?
I would think Tim Kelly, based on how that experience went. Wasn't there a whole bunch of stuff around Bill O'Brien and like DeAndre Hopkins' like girlfriend? Like a baby mama situation?
Don't get reckless now.
No. I swear, I promise you that there was something out there. Now, whether that was reckless reporting at the time or not is a different matter.
Those are the polls.
Excellent. That's the show. That's it for us this week. Have a great long weekend. We will not be with you. Well, apparently we will be with you in some capacity on Monday, but you'll just have to tune in to find out how. Blaine and Mickey's next.